The California Aqueduct runs from the Sacramento Delta to Lake Paris in Riverside County, with a western branch that splits off and it terminates in Castaic Lake in northern LA County. It runs up the Central Valley of California and actually provides a fair amount of irrigation for the agriculture in the Central Valley. Here's a section of it. Runs a considerable portion along I-5. When it gets to the southern end of the Central Valley, it's got to get up and over the Tehachapi Mountains in order to get into LA. So when you're coming down the 5 along a stretch of the aqueduct, you might see these very large pipes going up the hillside. This is from the floor of the Central Valley looking south. That view is so familiar, it's another one of those, oh yeah, that thing. This is the Edmonston pumping station with the forebay here in the foreground. This is a little bit closer up. Most people don't see it this close up, but there's the forebay and the pumping station in front of the pipes. Third and last on the list is the Colorado River Aqueduct. Here's the Colorado River behind the Hoover Dam, backing up Lake Mead. And this is a very familiar sight that people are aware of. But the Lake Mead is a reminder that contamination that ends up in the Colorado River can end up in the LA Basin. There was a large perchlorate manufacturing plant called Pepcon in Henderson near Las Vegas, Nevada, that had a fire and an explosion and released very much perchlorate into the Lake Mead Colorado River water. That water went down to Lake Havasu, which is the another reservoir backed up behind the Parker Dam, and that is the source area for the Colorado River Aqueduct. And so the water and its contamination ended up going into the Colorado River Aqueduct. The Colorado River Aqueduct extends from Parker Dam and Lake Havasu to Lake Matthews on the western end. And a fair amount of it, this is the last aqueduct that was designed by Mulholland. It was actually finished after he died. And a large part of it is gravity fed. Once the water is pumped out of Parker Dam, it's largely gravity down into the Imperial Valley. You can see the Imperial Valley is got the Salton Sea at the southern end, very extensive agricultural area. Some of the Colorado River Aqueduct water is diverted for agriculture into the Imperial Valley. And at that point then it needs to go uphill again to get to the basin. So it's pumped up to cross over the San Giorgiano Pass and then down into Lake Matthews. So when this aqueduct water reaches Orange County, how is it delivered? This slide has some cartoons with it. I will go through them one at a time. It'll be up to you to notice where the water comes into the system. The first one is pretty easy. It's the Colorado Aqueduct as it comes in and goes to Lake Matthews, and that would be on the right side of the screen. So in comes the water to Lake Matthews. You may have noticed a diversion towards Diamond Valley Lake and on down towards San Diego. The next cartoon is Lake Matthews water then going to the Weymouth treatment facility, which is in Laverne, California, which is where the 210 and the 57 meet. People need their geography by freeway intersections. So there goes the Lake Matthews water up to Weymouth. The third one is Lake Matthews to the Dimer facility. And the Dimer facility, if you'll notice, is kind of in the very center of the photograph where all of the aqueducts come together. It's a large treatment plant in Yorba Linda. So there's that delivery. And then the California Aqueduct East Branch, which is up in the northeast corner of the map, comes down and goes to the inland feeder. The inland feeder connects that east branch to the Diamond Valley Lake. The next one is at the California Aqueduct. Incidentally, the inland feeder, that water is coming out of the afterbay of the Devil's Canyon Dam. As the water comes down the east branch there, it comes down near the Cahoon Pass, east of Cahoon Pass, where the 15 freeway goes up and out of the LA Basin area. It comes down a slope that feeds the Devil's Canyon power plant. That water is then put into the inland feeder and sent down to Diamond Valley Lake. The next is the California Aqueduct to Mills in Riverside. And you can see that water came down and just touched the Mills treatment plant, which is in Riverside. Basically, that's where the 215 and the 60 and the 91 all come together. The next one, now we turn to the California Aqueduct going to the Weymouth and Dimer facilities. And lastly, the west branch now of the California Aqueduct, again north and west of the LA County line, comes down and feeds into the San Fernando Valley and the West Basin area. So what is the role for hydrogeology in all of this, groundwater management? And that's basically the management of the Orange County groundwater basin. That and the LA West Basin groundwater system as well, if we are talking about the greater LA area. And that of course includes regular field sampling, water levels, and map updates. That involves modeling the pumping wells and injection wells, the injection wells particularly along the seawater barriers, and also just pumping wells in their zone of influence. Modeling of the artificial recharge, again a lot of the aqueduct water as well as the natural water coming in from the Santa Ana River channel gets put into spreading basins. That needs to be monitored. Basically the groundwater basin is being used as a large storage reservoir. The storage reservoir, groundwater works efficiently as a storage reservoir because there's not a lot of evaporative losses. I recently saw a YouTube video, Veritasium, which is a very good science YouTube channel anyway. Person did a presentation on the shade balls that were covering a surface reservoir for the LA Department of Water and Power. And it's kind of amazing to think about that they were floating a bunch of these plastic black shade balls to protect the water or prevent the water in the reservoir from evaporating. Mentioned the seawater barriers. There's some transport modeling that goes along with that. Again, the rules require that the water, treated wastewater that goes into the seawater barrier must remain in the ground for a year before it's pulled out by a water supply well. You want to keep the levels at the right level to keep and monitor the saltwater encroachment and try to keep the saltwater encroachment back, while at the same time monitoring the pumping of the wells that are drawing water for water supply, and also maintaining a transport modeling time of 1 year. And lastly, there's water types. You're mixing water from many different sources. So the water in the groundwater system, some of it might be native, but a large portion of it is not. And this can be used actually to determine how well the basin is being managed, which water types are mixing, where, how much, what inputs have come in, what has that done to affect the water supply and the mixing. And again, I mentioned the perchlorate contamination that came in the system all the way from Lake Mead and by way of the Colorado River Aqueduct. And there's forensics then that can go along with the contaminants that come into the system, determining the source of the contaminants. And forensics can also be used to determine the sources of the different waters and where they're coming from in a particular well field. Well, that concludes my presentation of what's in my water and where's it from. Please visit Provenance Geosciences as well as this YouTube site for other environmental and geological and mathematical topics and musical topics. And until next time, this is Dr. Hoaglund signing off.